of early treatment is total in favor of the vaccines, I think, because there is a psychological program in the minds of people that they are going to be saved by this vaccine. The propaganda has worked that they're going to be saved by the vaccines, but they recognize the vaccines are fallible, that they really don't work unless every single person takes them.
Today I sit down with Dr. Peter McCullough, a leading expert on COVID-19 treatment, and author John Leake, co-authors of The Courage to Face COVID-19, Preventing Hospitalization and Death While Battling the Biopharmaceutical Complex. Why is much of the world's public health apparatus fixated on mass vaccination? Even now, is monkeypox really a threat, or is something else going on?
This is American Thought Leaders, and I'm Yanya Kellick.
John Leake and Dr. Peter McCullough, such a pleasure to have you on American Thought Leaders.
Thanks for having us.
Pleasure to be here.
I've been digging into the courage to face COVID-19. You're preventing hospitalization and death while battling the biopharmaceutical complex. John, how did you get interested in this topic? And you got interested rather early on, right?
Pretty much straight away. It was March of 2020. I was home visiting my family for Christmas. I started reading the first reports, mostly coming out of Milan. And I lived in Italy for a while and was somewhat familiar with the situation over there in general. And there were a number of things about the reporting that just struck me as implausible. So I began to think, there's a propaganda campaign going on here. The question is why? What is the agenda? What are we being asked to believe? So that was sort of the first moment in which I began to think, this could be something like a true crime story. I've written a couple of true crime books. But pretty quickly I realized in order to interpret this properly, I need a real top medical authority. And the question was finding a top medical authority who is also questioning the orthodoxy that we were being told. And I thought this is probably going to be a pretty tall order, but as luck would have it, the top authority who was also a leader of questioning the authority and actually publishing about it quickly. He lived 2 miles from my house in Dallas. So it was a very happy coincidence.
Oh, so really, this was, you just looked and you saw Dr. Peter McCullough and it happens to be he's down the road. Literally.
I mean, he'd already done his Senate testimony on November the 19th, 2020, and I saw that on C-SPAN, and I thought, this guy's a Dallas guy. I mean, the guy who's testifying before the U.S. Senate about questioning the orthodoxy, actually treating the illness in the outpatient setting. He lives 2 miles from my family home.
Okay, well, so, and just very briefly, Peter, tell me about that first meeting, because, you guys really dig into this whole process right from the beginning, like what happened with COVID, how the system, the country, the government dealt with it, and then also how some of the upstarts like yourselves dealt with it.
Well, it was my first approach from an author that I found out later on. John is a best-selling author, an award-winning author, and a true crime expert. And he invited me to an interview. So we went to a Dallas studio, and he simply sat behind the camera, asked me questions, and I gave him my responses. And I think what we both quickly came to recognize and appreciate is that there was a story here. And there was a powerful story. Part of it's about me and the roles that I play, how I develop my thinking and my response. And then part of it was about a very, very big global development happening.
So, Peter, I want to ask you about something a bit off to the side right now, because, as much as, we've been looking at COVID, obsessed with COVID for well over 2 years now, right? It's almost like now we're talking about a completely different disease, monkeypox, right? Oh, it's not an airborne virus, or at least so the science books tell me. And I've just heard a lot of different stuff about it. And there seems to be this, increase in cases. There seems to be, a kind of a media narrative emerging around this. And I just wanted to see, how are you viewing this whole thing, this whole monkeypox question?
The disease may be fear of the next contagion. And what we outline in our book, there was actually an entire response to pandemics and contagious illnesses being developed over the last decade. In fact, there was planning for this, informational planning. And when the news broke about monkeypox, an illness of which there are cases every single year. In fact, there hasn't been a case that hasn't been a year where we've been devoid of cases. There are dozens, if not hundreds of cases, and now we've amassed thousands of cases since it was first discovered. But why is it in the news cycle? Why are pictures, some pictures that are on the internet right now, Jan, are black and white? They look like they're decades old. So a brief summary. Monkeypox is in the orthopox virus family. It was initially described in monkeys in the Congo Basin, 1958. First human case, so it jumped from primates to humans, 1970. U.S. outbreak in 2003, when pet prairie dogs were mixed with giant pouch rats from the Congo Basin. They actually spread it to one another. Some people got it in the United States. That's 2003. No deaths. It manifests as a pustular rash. It's in the same family as smallpox and camelpox and cowpox, but monkeypox is not very communicable. It can spread from saliva and actually the liquid in the pustules. And what we had come to learn is that over the past 5 years, there was planning. So for an example, there was a development of a vaccine. And the vaccine is held by a company called Jynneos. It's a live attenuated vaccine. Monkeypox is of interest because whatever is done for smallpox works for monkeypox. And the thought is, if there was bioterrorism related to smallpox, which is still held in some labs worldwide, if it ever got into to nefarious hands, that we would need something to manage smallpox bioterrorism. So enter monkeypox. There are parallels. So there's a Jynneos live attenuated vaccine. There is a drug called tecovirimat or TPOXX. That's a VP37 inhibitor. It's a cell surface inhibitor. Works well. There is a well-developed thought process about what we would do with monkeypox. There was a paper by Beer, another one by Simpson in 2019, summarizing decades of literature on monkeypox and what we would do if monkeypox was part of a bioterrorism attack. And then in March of 2021, there was a simulation tabletop exercise by the Nuclear Threat Initiative, a think tank in Washington, and a Munich biosecurity group, where they had scenario planned a monkeypox bioterrorism event that, in this case, the monkeypox would be completely resistant to the Jynneos vaccine. It would lead to over 200 million deaths. Okay, again, it's just a theoretical tabletop planning exercise, but the release date for the bioterrorism attack was going to be May 15th of 2022, just 7 days before the World Economic Forum meeting in Davos and the World Health Organization meeting in Switzerland regarding a global treaty for pandemic management. So the timing of this was so suspicious that whoever the stakeholders are involved could have had the idea of just using the reported cases of monkeypox, of which occurs worldwide, to juice the system with fear. So what, in response to this, was the U.S. government immediately said that they had pre-purchased, they had actually purchased now 13 million doses of the Jynneos vaccine in preparation for a monkeypox major outbreak in the United States. We had in April 22nd of 2022, a report from the CDC of a case in Dallas. There was a man who flew from Africa to Dallas. He first went to Atlanta. He saw people there. He came to Dallas. He had lots of exposure, developed the classic monkeypox, ultimately was hospitalized in Dallas, I think largely for contagion control. They treated him with tecovirimat or TPOXX. He did fine, but the report comes out in the CDC MMWR, describing this case, and all of his case contacts, he didn't spread it to a single person, so it's not very transmissible. But the important point is on the author line there are over 36 authors, and they're termed the CDC Monkeypox Response Team. So we have had planning, a lot of planning for monkeypox, and this almost seems like it's Event 201, now for the next pandemic illness, the next business opportunity, if you will, for CEPI?
I mean, that's fascinating. And of course, you know, you've been doing a lot of work sort of mapping out the biopharmaceutical complex as you describe it. John, of course, I'm speaking to here. That's fascinating. So the only thing that I have trouble with is this isn't a terribly communicable disease, right? Like it's only done by essentially by physical contact, as I understand it, unless there's some sort of crazy mutation that puts it into the air that would make it highly communicable, right? And how this plays out, how is this going to be convincing to the population, assuming there's a kind of injection of scare here?
I mean, I think the guys who made the vaccine are going to make out really well. And I think what this biopharmaceutical complex has discovered is there are all of these pathogens out there that could become an emergent disease pandemic. If you present it, if you take a few isolated cases and you say, oh dear, this is going to be this terrifying thing that goes nuclear, then it triggers all of this pandemic response, including the generation of huge amounts of money. And if you're positioned well within the complex, you know in advance you're going to be the recipient. Now, the one really salient point in all of this is what these guys really like are vaccines. I mean, public health is actually a very complex thing. I mean, it's sanitation, it's the ecology of the country, it's the overall health condition of the population, the age of the population. But if you're hanging out with guys in the biopharmaceutical complex, you wouldn't know that there are these variables. It's just vaccinate, and that's it.